I was doing the full-time scientist gig during the day. That was like 8 to 5. And then I would get off and then I would do these renovations at night. So I was sometimes up to like 2, 3 o'clock in the morning painting cabinets, just trying to get it done so that I can get another shift in the next morning. So yeah, I was full-time scientist. I had no plans on getting into real estate. And then, man, I made one of the like best decisions and worst decisions I ever made at the time. And I read 2 books in the same month. It was The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss.
Okay.
And then Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki, right?
Okay.
Those 2 books in the same month absolutely wrecked my life, right? Because up until that point, PhD trained scientist, I did my fellowship. All I knew was academia and then industry science. And, I loved the field, but there is a slight criticism there. They don't teach, or at least in the program that I was in, I was never taught how to be an entrepreneur. Frankly, I didn't even know what entrepreneurial was. Like I was just trained how to be either an academic scientist or a industry scientist and really no other trajectory. So that was like, I read those 2 books and this was maybe 2 years ago and my eyes were just like completely widened. And I was like, I have no idea what this is, but I'm intrigued.
Okay.
What was the number one?
Yeah.
What intrigued you the most?
I think what intrigued me the most is I didn't have to trade my time for money. And that was completely new to me, right? Because my entire life I was trading time for money.
Yep.
And I think that's really what I think blew my mind. And I was like, oh man, if there's a possibility that I could do something and make money and not necessarily have to trade all of my hours to do it, like I'm interested. And so a month later, I was like, all right, what's the one thing that I can do? And this was, everyone was having a YouTube channel or TikTok was just getting big. And so I was like, oh man, I don't know how to do any of these things. I don't know how to grow a social media platform. I don't know how to code, but what is the one thing I know how to do? And I had just bought this primary residence and I fixed it up. And I was like, okay, I know a little bit about real estate. Not much, right? This was just my first experience doing it. And so I was like, all right, this tangibly makes sense to me. And, after I read those books, I started to pour into it a little bit more, started reading more about entrepreneurialism. I got into different podcasts. The Bigger Pockets podcast is kind of where I ended up. Yep. And then I realized, okay, I could probably do real estate as my vehicle to get into entrepreneurialism. And this was kind of just a side hustle for me at the time. It wasn't like I was trying to leave my career as a scientist to get into real estate. It was just, hey, here's a way that I can make some additional money and then hopefully build up some passive income. So I did that. This all made sense to me. I decided to get onto the Bigger Pockets forums. I was looking at all of the questions that people were asking and seeing some of the answers that they were having. And they were like, hey, rentals is a really good strategy to start building up some passive income.
Yep.
At the time, I didn't have much money. So I was making good money as a scientist, but my financial literacy was fairly poor. The only thing I knew about money was, hey, you should pay into I was, the Dave Ramsey approach to get snowballs, paying it down. That all made sense to me. And so that's what I was doing. I was doing this professionally for about 2 to 3 years at the time. And I was pouring all of my money into my mortgage. So I had a sick mortgage situation because I recasted my loan. I had a really small principal balance. And so I wasn't paying much money on the mortgage. So my lifestyle, which is actually a really, really important component. Let me backtrack. The few things that I did learn about financial literacy at the time was try to bring your lifestyle as low as you possibly could. And that was easy for me. I was a single guy. I didn't have much overhead in my life, right? It was my first ever house. So I was living off of $1,500 a month, maybe less.
Nice.
All right. So I was pouring all my money into the mortgage. I recasted the loan. My mortgage balance was super low. And I was like, okay, well, if I could just tap into some of this money, I could buy a rental and I'll just give it a shot. And so I got educated on getting a home equity line of credit. I got that. And then a month later, I got a rental. I found a really good realtor on biggerpockets.com.
Well, real quick, though, that's pretty interesting because that was your whole mindset. It kind of is traditional. It's get a good job, go to school, get a good job. And you're just pay off my house.
Yeah.
You're literally, we're busting your butt, throwing it all into the house. That's
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
Cool. So
and I didn't know better, right?
Yeah,
I didn't know about it. I mean, I had a 401k, I had a Roth IRA. Those were the only investment vehicles that I knew about.
Okay.
And so I hadn't, real estate really didn't make sense to me up until that point where I read those books and then started to dive into it deeper.
Great.
And so once I learned, hey, I could take this money and I could invest it as opposed to just paying off my mortgage, which was a 3% interest rate, right? So looking back now, I'm like, man, what the decisions that we're making aren't necessarily in alignment with who I am now.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so I took the home equity line of credit out.
Cool.
Got my first rental.
Where was it?
Casa Grande, Arizona.
My God. So you went from Phoenix to
Casa.
So it's a sub-market,
It's
right?
a sub-market, yeah.
Okay, cool.
And the reason was, I mathematically, I started some very beginner level underwriting. I started to realize I think I could pencil a good deal and not a good deal. Numbers have always been pretty easy for me. And